Welcome, everybody. My name is Jill Jonathan, and I'm with Red Wine and Blue. We are a community of women who use digital media and friend-to-friend organizing to change the world one suburb at a time. And I'm assuming that most people have heard that we have this issue going on in our country with books being removed from shelves. Libraries, schools, name it, and we're very concerned about this, and we're not going to stay quiet about this. So we have started a series where we talk to authors that have had their books removed from shelves and banned. So today we will be talking with author Becky Albertalli, and Joe, as in JoJo from Jers, will be joining us well.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good,
We're so excited for this
So we are living in crazy times, as we all know. So
yeah,
let's just get into it. So Becky, my first question for you is just how does it feel to have your work that I would assume you put so much of yourself into, and seeing it literally being removed off the shelves, and not, you're writing for the young audience, young adults, and they're not all having access to it. How does that actually feel for you?
It's awful. I feel like there's a little bit of I don't want to say misconception, but I guess like a lot of times I see people talk about it as like, it's a badge of honor, like, you're part of, and like, I definitely get that. Because like, I certainly don't want to be like in the group with the book banners. So I'm glad to like not be one of them, but, oh God, it's like, when it happens to you, it really is unnerving, I guess, is kind of the best way to describe it. Recently, there's been a lot of controversy in certain places around my second book, actually. Like, it's like somebody discovered the Upside of Unrequited, which is my little it's a book about a girl who like has never been kissed and is like angsting about that. Like, that's what it's about. But what they've done is they kind of cherry picked kind of certain moments in the book. It's like, it's unbelievable to watch, but kind of transforming these conversations that like I certainly know the context of them in the book. And they, it's like being called a groomer. I mean, I literally have been accused of, grooming children in New Jersey who have never met. It's horrible.
I'm so glad you brought up your second book, The Outside of Unrequited, because full disclosure, that's how I became aware of all of this. I became aware of the fact that your book was being targeted because an old friend of mine reached out from a town that's very close to me, very near where I grew up, and their school board, which has turned into a cesspool of right-wing extremism, was putting this book up for removal from the middle school. And they said, hey, Joe, can you just amplify this? Can you bring this to people's attention? This is crazy. They're taking all of this completely out of context. You just described the book yourself. So the town is Sparta, New Jersey, and it's really close to me. And I thought I was paying really, really close attention to what's going on with book bans. And I didn't even know this was happening in a neighboring town. So these moms and dads who were advocating for the book to not be removed from the middle school said just what you just said. They were taking so much out of context. Ultimately, the board, despite a committee advising them to keep the book in the middle school, the board decided to take it out of the middle school and move it up to the high school, which is a compromise, right? But at the end of the day, that's still a ban. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Those parents, by the way, are listening to this conversation. They're so excited to talk to you. This is very personal for them, very personal for me. So I just wanted to ask you, what do you say to people who might be thinking, well, this doesn't impact me directly. This isn't happening in my town. This isn't happening in my school board. What do you have to say? What would you say to that?
I would say that it's really tempting to believe that. I think that kind of goes right alongside the, like, you know, well, these extremists, like, you know, are off the chain in Florida. Like that stands right next to, well, you know, certain books, like I don't know, like usually it's genderqueer, which is the scapegoat. You know, certain books are really, really inappropriate, and then but like, you know, I'm comfortable with this subset of like books that I've declared to be wholesome queer books, and I understand where people are coming from, and as somebody who writes like wholesome queer books, whatever they say about Upside, I've never written a sex scene ever. There's a sex scene in one of my collabs, and my co-author wrote it because I didn't want to write it. I didn't want like I didn't want my parents to read that from me, you know. So like, it's hard because it's like such a you know, web. It's so much misinformation, and I think like a lot of that's very intentional, coming from the right and the, like, what is it, the Moms for Liberty, and just a lot of these organized groups on the right are deliberately you know, just conflating, you know, it's like the way they describe it, you think it's like pornography going into kindergarten stuff, when it's like actually a very kind of middle of the road, with just like the average amount of content going into typically like 8th grade and up or something. So
Right. Reflective of the real world. You know what I mean? The real world that these kids are going to be entering or are living in, and content that they're going to be exposed to elsewhere in their daily lives. And it's interesting because statistically, books which contain LGBTQ plus themes congratulations, are the most banned books in the country by a slim majority over those with protagonists of color, prominent secondary characters of color. So, I mean, it's no accident that these marginalized groups are being sort of othered, right, and targeted. And I was just, one of the questions that the group from Sparta asked is, you know, what do you think the impact is on both those young people who identify or may identify as LGBTQ, or those who don't, like just across the board? What do you think the impact is on the attack on this kind of content?
it is, you know, I feel it's so insidious because, you know, it is affecting kids on so many different levels. Like it's just almost like a multi-pronged attack where, you know, the people on the front lines are really, you know, the queer kids and particularly trans kids, who, you know, are hearing this, you know, and this is true even if like these kids are not at a school that is technically affected right now. Just the national conversation about this, the international conversation about this, is just bombarding them with the message that you are inappropriate, like you are less appropriate than your peers, and it's not true. It's not true, but you know, the purpose of this initiative coming from the right is to hammer that home, and you know, kind of alongside that, you have other people absorbing the message of like these kids and their very real experiences are less appropriate. That there's something like, you know, there's something like adult, there's something like X-rated or something about like just these like developmental experiences that often do happen during the teen years, preteen years. There are a lot of kids who do begin to understand kind of their own queerness younger than that, and some who don't. It's you know, I think that's what's so great about having different types of media and different categories of books, because these conversations are going to look really different in a middle grade book versus a YA book. And that is a kind of curation that, you know, librarians are, and teachers and particularly librarians, particularly school librarians, are very equipped to like untangle the nuances of that. Parents, you all know your kids, and you tend to know kind of, you know, which books like your kid may be ready for, even if that's not a book that would show up in their classroom yet.
That's so true.
And I have a question. I heard someone being interviewed today, actually on the podcast I was listening to, and they said, and the interviewer was like, well, why are some parents getting a say in what books are going to be in schools? When I want my kid to have access to that book, why does that parent get to take that access away from my kid? And the response that person had was, well, if you want your kid to have access, then you can have it in your own home. That sounds great, right? But now I know, like, I have an 8th grader and a 5th grader. So my kids will have access to the books that they want to read, because that's the kind of parent I am. But not all parents are like that, or aware, or it's not safe for a kid to ask for a book that has same-sex relationship. And, you know, I guess I'm curious, like, what your thoughts on that. When I heard that, it kind of felt cringy to me. And I'm like, it's not as simple as that. Don't we want kids to have access to different ideas and different stories?
Yeah, I know. It's ridiculous, because it's like kind of like holding up this banner of like parents' rights, but like only the parents who agree with us, you know, and like, and yeah, like you're right, and there's so many reasons why some kid, like with that kind of system, like some kids are going to have access and some won't. Even kids whose parents are very affirming, and maybe like, you know, these kids may be out to their parents, but like they may not be able to afford books in the home, you know, like there's so many different possible scenarios that are like very common. And you know, at the end of the day, like, you know, every single parent is probably going to land somewhere a little bit different with like, you know, is my particular kid ready for this particular book? And you know, you can't, like, the reason that like librarians, you know, like that is their entire purpose, is they know the literature, they know how to introduce it, they know kind of what like types of content are in each ones, and how to like kind of divide that up and decide like what feels right for their particular school community. And you know, I think maybe this would be a conversation if this initiative was being led by librarians, I guess, you know, but it's not. And I haven't heard a single librarian speak up in favor of this censorship, this you know, for all the like cancel culture discussion, like this,
Right.
This feels a lot like cancel culture coming from the right, you know?
Oh, 100%. It's the hypocrisy always, I mean, it never really it astounds me because it's not surprising, but just a quick shout out to librarians.
Yes.
Oh my God. Yes.
like I worked in the public school system for a long time, and I know the librarians take their jobs very seriously. They cultivate the materials that the children have access to very carefully, and they don't do it. It's not, you know, they don't do it by themselves. You know, oftentimes there's lots of people who weigh in, and they take, you know, they just take their jobs very seriously, and I applaud them. And now they're under sustained attack as well. And I did see at the Sparta board meeting, I did see people speaking up on behalf of the librarian who thought that the book was appropriate in their middle school. And again, that committee that decided that book was appropriate in the middle school just sort of, you know, corroborated that what the librarian had said. So it's interesting because as I listen to you talk, and what's so important, you come from a background, you were a former clinical psychologist, right? Like you worked with children and teens. So, I mean, you understand this on so many different levels, in terms of the impact on what the messages these kids are receiving, like you said, when they're told that this content isn't appropriate, or that I just, like, as a mom, and full disclosure, my daughter she's gonna be 10, and she introduced me to Love Victor, which, you know, I'm just so glad that she hooked me into the show for 100%. Like, I'm now addicted to it too. But she's, you know, 9, and some of these parents might be like, oh, that's not appropriate content for her. I'm like, why? These are stories that cover, I mean, it could be any gender, there could be any, you know, sexuality. These are universal stories that every kid can see themselves in, whether or not it's a gay character or a cisgender character or whatever it is. And my daughter loves the show, and I love the show too. So I just wanted to, like, again, go back to this idea of what is this going to do, but from a clinical psychologist point of view, but also from just a human being and an author's point of view, what is this doing to these children, to these young people?
Yeah, well, to be clear, I actually cannot ethically answer as a clinical psychologist. I haven't practiced in a decade. I deliberately let my license go because I began to understand that, like, I am not going to be practicing for a very long time, if ever. So, but answering as a mom and as an author, and as somebody who, you know, does have an education, a background in psychology, you know, I mean, I'm concerned all around, but my biggest concerns are certainly for, you know, unfortunately, it's the kids who are kind of going to fall into the cracks, who do not have moms who will watch Love Victor with them. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's heartbreaking. It was the biggest frustration that I had as a psychologist, because I love the work and I love the kids that I was working with. And I also knew that, like, I was always going to be working with the kind of self-selected, you know, like, it's the parents who are willing to kind of bring their kids to therapy. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the parents know everything that's going on with their kids, and that it's like, you know, there are parents who bring their kids to therapy and then they're bad parents or something like that. It's like very fluid, but you know what I mean? It's like, there are going to be a lot of kids who you want to reach, who, you know, don't have that kind of support at home. Those are the kids who I think need that safe space in their school the most. And, you know, there's no backup option, you know, other than just growing up. And that is too much to ask of a, you know, a teen. Just like, yeah, just, you know, I hope, hang in there till you're 18, I guess. Like, that's, you know, and like that, I think that's why we, you know, why groups like you guys, and author groups that I know of, and just their coalitions of adults who want to, you know, reinforce, like, the structures that had been in place that are so critical.
And Becky, as a follow-up to that, what kind of response do you get from the readers? I would assume you get a lot of positive response from the kids who are reading these books and seeing themselves. So I would just love to hear from you. Like, what are some of the, like, I would imagine that's partly of what motivates you to keep going. So I would just love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's complicated. And I think, like, you know, as an author and stuff, like, I think, you know, there are going to be a lot more readers out there than those who kind of know how to have access to an author. And I've kind of, my, you know, my emails now shut down, like a lot of my social medias are shuttered. So, like, you kind of have to really know how to find me. And, you know, and what I tend to hear is just, you know, people who, you know, I hear a lot from people who are in just, especially like the global South, just various other countries that have a variety of different cultural norms around like open queerness. And I hear a lot from, you know, and from American teens and kids, especially in communities like, I mean, like honestly, like where I lived and grew up in, you know, my suburb's very purple now, but like I live in the suburbs, grew up in the suburbs, I'm in Georgia. And my suburb was very conservative when I grew up, like one of the most conservative in the country, known for that. Less so now, which is a delight, but like, you know, and it's like, I hear from a lot of those kids, I think it's probably like, because a lot of my books are set in the South and stuff like that. And so it's, you know, everybody ends up having a different experience, and there's not a universal Southern queer experience or anything like that. But I hear from a lot of closeted kids and adults too, and adults, and a lot of people who are adults now, but were in a fraught situation when they were younger, you know. You can't overstate, you know. And then I'm also kind of thinking about, like, you know, a lot of my friends write queer books too, and I know that they're hearing from people as well. I have gone on tour and done events with them, and I've seen kids come up to my friends, to me, and it's very moving. It is really painful to hear just kind of what a lot of people have to fight through just to understand, you know, your own identity, which is very hard to do sometimes when there's not accessible media that reflects that. That's like, I personally know that, like, it's, you know, and then there's you know, just every single family situation is different, every single school environment is different, you know, geographically, and it's like, it feels like the Wild West, and you know, and it just feels like sometimes media, books, and the places, you know, that make those things accessible, you know, namely, well, libraries for sure, also the internet, really, you know, yeah. Certain parts of the internet, which is a little bit more fraught, you know, but like that's the lifeline, you know, like that's, you know, sometimes that's what you're holding on to until you find yourself in a position where you can change your circumstances, you know.
Yeah, we were talking to Joe Knowles last week. Unfortunately, there's a lot of banned authors that we have to talk to, and one of the things she said that really resonated with me, she's like, you know, we want these kids to feel safe to explore these things that may be going on with them personally, or what's going on in the world, and where's a safer place to do that than on the pages of a book? You know what I mean? We want our kids to be exposed to these themes that, you know, that are in real life, but we don't necessarily want them, you know, surfing the fraught internet, you know, freely as much as, you know, we would prefer them to find the safe comfort of a book, to be exposed to some of these things, or to feel like maybe seen in these things, or to see others that maybe they don't identify with. That's my dog.
Yeah, I've got my cat with me.
Yeah, you probably heard mine earlier.
I just wanted to ask, because again, the women and men from Sparta, New Jersey, that's my dog, who brought this to my attention, Ruby. My dog is from Georgia, so she has a lot to say.
We can still hear you. It's
Sorry.
okay.
So, yeah, back to some questions from them, because you know, their town is really wrestling with this right now, because the board was successful in removing the book from the middle school. So their question is, how do you feel about the age grade level being used as the excuse to move this book to the high school in their particular case?
I mean, I'm not surprised, because that's usually in the past, like up until fairly recently with this organized push, I mean, this is not the first time this has happened. My books have been challenged, as have my friends' books since I've been writing. A lot of times what'll happen is just kind of this softer censorship where a book will be weeded, I guess, I think is the term, where it's like kind of taken out of circulation, but it's not like a big school board fight. I do think, now we're seeing these things blow up because a lot of that, like there's this messaging that goes alongside of it coming from the right that is the point. It is part of this, like it is not an isolated initiative. Like it's very connected to the like drag queen storytime bans. It is connected to the laws that we're seeing pop up. I just found out that there's a bill that's going through my state Congress now, and maybe today or something, that's targeting care for trans kids. And it's all part of a broader message that kind of they are pulling together of they being kind of Moms of Liberty and those other kinds of groups, and the DeSantis kind of people,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, so it's that anything related to queerness is inappropriate, is suspicious. Like any adult that that wants to protect or just provide resources or anything, should be looked on with suspicion. There's that groomer narrative that like is threaded all through it, and and it's on the one hand it's like a moral panic, but there's just also something so sinister about it because it's so intentional, and like they know what they're doing. And I think it's frustrating because you can kind of see some of the ways it can, like, there are ways that they kind of can get into the heads of people who are otherwise pretty level-headed, like there's for example, like I had talked on my Instagram once about how Leah on the Offbeat, which is my third book, had been banned in various places, and that one's just so ridiculous. I mean, it's just like it's like there's like 2 kisses in that book, and there's like nothing in it. And yet there's something so icky feeling about saying that, because it's like, I don't want to buy into their framework of, oh, but Leah's okay. They're all okay. Yeah. That's not the point. Like, they're not banning Leah because they wrongly have decided it's not okay. They're banning Leah because it's queer. That's it, and so there is this way that they can kind of divide us. I think it's really important to resist that, and I think, like, I don't want to, there's like even a comment, I think, on the announcement posts, which I do not want to single this commenter out because I have seen a million statements like this. Like, it's a totally normal thing that I've heard, but I it's something to the effect of, I love Simon, but I'm thinking maybe the reason Simon was banned is because of that one chapter. That would be chapter 9, I am sure, which is The chapter I didn't ever want to have to talk about with my parents, and that's that's my journey. But like it is, so what it is like it is a very very non-explicit masturbation scene with no references to body parts. It's like a very light touch. I think probably if you were too young for that content, you wouldn't know what was happening, is my guess. But I would say that like it's true that along with the cussing is probably why, like, except for certain parents who know their kids very well, typically that book is not given to like kids who are below a certain age. Like it I would say most commonly maybe 8th grade and up or something like. But no, that's not why it's being banned though. And the reason that I want to push back on that is I find it helpful sometimes to just take a step back and look at just YA in general, right? And like, what are some of the other books in the space that are not queer? And what is the kind of content we see in those books? And compare the ones that are getting banned with the ones that are not. And, yeah, it's just like, it's not about chapter 9. It's not about the content. Also, thank you for loving Simon too. But no, like basically there is this tendency, and I feel it sometimes, to be like, okay, well, I want to like kind of hear both sides out on this. I feel that impulse too. I do, but we have to keep in mind that this is a targeted effort from an organized group of right-wing people who are, who have this initiative going on in conjunction with other initiatives that are like, all being pushed at once, designed to kind of flood us and overwhelm us.
Yeah. Something we talk about a lot at Red, Wine, and Blue, something that as moms resonates, is that as much as we think we don't have in common, like as much as we think we're divided on issues, all of us want one thing, which is for our kids to feel seen, to feel loved, to feel like they matter, to feel like they're included, or that they shouldn't feel ashamed. Like that we want our kids to feel that they are comfortable in their own skin. Like a lot of what you said makes so much sense to me. So about this idea that like even reasonable people can be like, I'm a little confused. Like maybe I want to kind of both sides this, and maybe I'm not okay with that. But when you really just talk about the story, right? So like Entertainment Weekly's review of your story, while first kisses, first loves, and even first sexual experiences have all been dealt with in some form or another, she tackles these big milestones head on and with aplomb. That could be about anybody, right? That's a universal theme in growing up that every one of us has experienced. But when you take one specific group, and like you said, when you target, if that happens to be about queer people, and that's somehow suddenly inappropriate and ban-worthy, I mean, it's the hypocrisy there is one thing. But again, like, we all want our kids to feel seen and to feel safe and to feel comfortable in their own skin. We can all agree on that. And again, the book is the safest place to do it because, it's just their pages, right? You're not going out and getting into trouble. And so I just think it's so interesting. Like you said, the common denominator here is not the content. It's not chapter 9. It's one thing. They're targeting a group of people that are already marginalized. And as moms, as parents, we wouldn't want that for anyone else's child. We certainly wouldn't want that for our own. And I think we have to try and remember and remind people who might be like, this is not okay. Like at the end of the day, what would they want for their children?
Oh, and I have like, I've tried to think about it because it really is, it can be hard to imagine, like, what would I say to a parent who wants, who is in favor of banning the Upside of Unrequited or whichever book is in question, because most of the things that like come to my mind I don't think would necessarily translate, because there's some just fundamental differences in our goals. Like if you don't want your kid to feel comfortable with their own queerness, like I can't accommodate that. My books can't accommodate that. But what I think I would recommend, and I don't know that this is something that they'll hear, but is like best practices. I would say, you're an adult, so with the understanding that like you as an adult are not going to find content that is above your reading level. So you go ahead and pick it up and read it. You don't have to buy it. You don't have to give me your money. Just go to the library, whatever. Give it a read, especially if you're 8th grader, whoever, your 7th grader is interested in reading it. And know what's in it, know what you're talking about. And like, if your kid still wants to read it, at first, so chances are they're gonna find a way to read it. Wouldn't you rather that they talk to you about it? Like, you could have a conversation with them, and you could like, I'm not saying that you have to have the same conversation that I would have with my kids about it. Like, you could have a conversation with your kid about why you think it's inappropriate, and then hear them out, and and then you can let that be a dialogue. But don't pretend that these books contain content that they don't. Don't lie about why you object to them, and don't like, I don't know, like, have some respect for your kids, have some respect for other people's kids.
I'm glad you have some respect for your kids and other people's kids. And a theme that I'm hearing you say that I think is so needed is, it's heartbreaking to me that anybody would feel that they're inappropriate because of the person they love or have a crush on. At this age, it's kind of more crushes and young love, and that's the message that's being sent with this censorship, that your feelings are inappropriate. And it's incredibly heartbreaking to me. Becky, I know that it's not stopping you from writing these stories, so I so appreciate that. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your newest book that's coming out in May. Can you just tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. Well, this book is called Imogen, obviously, and it is, a realistic YA contemporary. I think, to me, it's very much in conversation with my other books, especially my first book, Simon. And it is about a girl who, at the beginning of the book, considers herself to be straight, cishet, and an ally of her many queer friends and family members. And and then she has, just a very enlightening trip to her best friend's college during spring break, which is going to be like the college where she's going to. So it's like her, her campus visit, and she falls for a girl. And, and then she realizes kind of a lot of what she has repressed and a lot of what kinds of messaging she has internalized.
I'm very much looking forward to that.
Oh, thank you.
I just personally wanted to thank you for this conversation, because it's so important. Especially, it's crazy to me that it's 2023 and these are the conversations that we seem to have an inexhaustible resource of, because what's happening is so insidious. And I think that the best way to combat what they're doing, what's being done, is by talking to the authors, talking to each other, talking to parents, talking to the people at your school board meetings, talking to the people in your communities, destigmatizing, demystifying, taking away these all the misinformation, all the designed, targeted lies about pornography, which, by the way, the threshold for pornography is pretty high. Like, let's be, it's like seriously explicit.
It is unreal seeing what is labeled as pornography. As somebody who is just very familiar with a lot of queer books and like looking at these lists, I'm just like, do you know what pornography means? Like,
right.
you know?
Maybe not.
Right. Yeah, but I just, from a personal perspective, and also just on behalf of my daughter who loves the things you've created, thank you. I think, again, we have more in common than we think, and there's truth, and then there's an attack on the truth. And every time we have these conversations and bring the truth to light, it moves the dial, I think, a little bit, and we have to keep doing that, because it's not getting better without us standing up and speaking out. And your work is so important, and I thank you for sticking with it. It's important and impactful, and thank you.
Thank you for those lovely words, but also like for just the work that y'all are doing, and you know, just the very kind of personal nature of, like, you know, this group in particular really appeals to me, because I am like a part of these communities, and I know that like it is like these relationship-based conversations that sometimes feel like maybe our only shot right now. And I really do think, you know, that there's an impact that like these kinds of conversations can have that you're not seeing elsewhere. Very grateful.
Yeah, thank you. And just before we go, I would love to hear, I know one way that we can support you, obviously, is to buy the books. And I'm very excited to figure out, I have an avid reader who's an 8th grade girl, so I'm going to look and try to figure out which ones she might like the best. But do you have a favorite bookstore that you would recommend us going to pick out these books?
I have a lot of favorites. Well, I would say, you know, two of my, like, you know, hometown bookstores that I've worked with a lot, kind of down in Decatur over the years, are Little Shop of Stories and also Karis Books and More. And then there's also another bookstore that's kind of up near me, where I, you know, all along periodically will like sign books if orders come in and are requested, and that would be Bookmiser in Marietta. But there's so many. I mean, if you can, an indie bookstore in general is a fantastic place. And, you know, the indie booksellers in particular, and also I see you Barnes and Noble booksellers and everybody like out there kind of working within imperfect institutions. But you know, there are a lot of people who are fighting with us, and the indie booksellers are definitely right up there too, you know.
And you can find your titles also on our Red Wine and Blue website, right? In our
bookshop. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, we added some there. And I just, before we go to, I just want to let everybody know, on our website, redwine.blue, we have a whole section called Book Band Busters. So we do a band book club. I think this month is The Bluest Eye, and then next month is, oh my gosh, I'm reading the book. It has magenta in the title, and it's stories of trans people. It's like multiple stories. I read the first story. It was so good. Beyond Magenta, I think that's what it's called. Yeah, and then, you know, we're doing these IG lives as well. And then you can go to our Red Wine and Blue bookshop and purchase some of these books. So we're going to keep that conversation going. And Becky, just incredibly grateful for your work and for your time today. So thank you.
So thank you so much.
All right. Bye, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.